I get to work a lot with relationships and marriages. Today at Live on Purpose TV, 9 guaranteed principles to make a better marriage. I've done several of these videos about divorce, child custody. You know what's even more fun for me to talk about? Marriage, and how to make a good, solid marriage. What are the tips that can get us there? More than just sharing tips with you today, I'm going to be sharing some principles that are guaranteed. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. To set that up, let's go to some research that was done. This was years ago by a man named Dr. John Gottman. Dr. Gottman is one of the leading researchers in marriage and family relations, and he wrote a book called The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, where he reports this research that was done. Now, here's the short version of what Dr. Gottman found. He found, this is a little shocking to some people, but he found that roughly 70% of the problems in a relationship or a marriage are unresolvable. Let that sink in for a minute. I share this with some people and they're just like, well, then what's the use, right? And other people are just relieved because they realize they're not so weird. 70% of the problems in a marriage are unresolvable. Let's talk about that for a minute. Problems. I think Dr. Gottman meant conflicts. You think about it. Anytime you bring 2 different people together, you will create conflict. Why? Because they're different. We have different opinions, different preferences, different backgrounds, different genders, different cultures. We're different. And as we come together, those differences cause conflicts. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, okay? Because differences are also essential to a relationship. It's the differences that make us relevant and interesting to each other. You have to have them. Otherwise, there's no reason for the relationship. If you were both exactly the same, one of you would be unnecessary. We don't have to talk about which one, right? But it doesn't matter because you're exactly the same. Differences make us relevant and interesting to each other. Even at the level of gender, it's the differences that are interesting, right? So if you can connect with that for a minute, we have to have differences in order to have a reason for the relationship in the first place. Okay, that's going to cause some conflict. So, moving on in the research, Dr. Gottman found that this was true for miserable, highly conflicted, headed for divorce couples. Makes sense, right? He also found that this was true for happy, well-adjusted, stable, satisfied couples. There was no difference in the number of unresolvable problems that these 2 groups had. You couldn't even distinguish between the miserable ones and the happy ones based on that metric. Interesting. What does that suggest to you? I got kind of excited about this when I found out because it's not about the problems. You know what? Back in shrink school, they taught us that you bring a couple in, you set them on your couch, I do have a couch right over there, and you talk to them for about an hour or more about their problems, and people would leave feeling worse, or beat up on, or teamed up on, or like, oh, that wasn't fun, and I got fired on a regular basis. Well, obviously that's not working, right? It was funny because I came home from this conference. I got to hear Dr. Gottman himself present this research. This was probably 20 years or more ago. And I came home from this conference, right? I'd paid a couple of $100 to be there. And Vicki, as I was reporting in, my wife, summarized, do more of what works and less of what doesn't. Is that what you learned in 2 days, Paul? I was like, yeah, pretty much that's it. But it's true. We're going to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. So let's get really clear about which is which. Okay? Now back to the research. Dr. Gottman found a 4-part process that was absolutely predictable in putting people on this side of the board. In fact, he brags in his book that he can predict divorce in 1 interview. and he's really accurate. How does he make that prediction? He looks for these 4 concepts. He called it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Do you like that imagery? Here's where he went. The first of these 4 horsemen is called criticism. Now, criticism doesn't have to be real or intended. As long as it's perceived, it works. Honestly, I've been a shrink for 23 years. I'm really good at offending people. And honestly, I don't want to. It's not in my heart. That's not what I intend. Well, why are people getting offended? Because of their perceptions. Criticism doesn't have to be real or intended. As long as it's perceived, it leads to the next step. Defensiveness. Defensiveness. This makes sense, right? Because if you're being attacked, what do you want to do? Get your shield up. Protect yourself. Defensiveness leads to the next step. Gottman called this one contempt. Contempt is kind of like defensiveness turned hostile. So you got your shield up, now you draw your sword. You're going to try to get some jabs in, a counterattack. The last of the 4 horsemen, Gottman called this one stonewalling. A more permanent form of defensiveness. If you can picture building up a stone wall, turning away from each other rather than turning toward each other. And Gottman's point was, if we see the 4 horsemen and it becomes the habitual way that people deal with their unresolvable problems, and if they're not willing to change it, I'm glad he added that part, it predictably leads to separation. A lot of times divorce will happen if this is the chronic pattern that people have. Now, I didn't share this with you to alarm you because probably this is going on in your relationship, right? I just want you to be aware of it. And it's common. It happens in most couples. But what we want to do is less of what doesn't work, get over on this side of the board with more of what does. So we're clear about what doesn't work, right? Now, like my brilliant wife said, we're going to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. So we got to get clear about what's on this side of the board. This is where we get back to the guarantee that I told you about at the beginning of the video. I have been a shrink for 23 years, and you can't shock me because I've seen all kinds of stuff. I've heard all kinds of stuff. There are 9 principles that are absolutely guaranteed to create a successful marriage. We're not going to get into all the reasons why I'm willing to guarantee that. But just keep in mind, I've seen a lot of stuff. And everything that I've seen, I still haven't encountered anything that couldn't be resolved with the proper application of these 9 principles. I'll share them with you now. Principle number 1, positivity. Oh, big surprise that Dr. Paul's talking about positivity again. Remember the model that we shared in one of our first videos on this channel. That's because we refer back to it all the time. This represents how you choose to see your life and what energy you can bring to what you're going to create next. Between evaluation and creation, this is powerful, and it is the first of those 9 guaranteed principles. Principle number 2, values. Values have to do with those shared beliefs that you have and what is important to you and why you got into this marriage in the first place. So this is where a lot of people go to their faith or their religion, prayer and meditation, centering on that purpose and the values. Number 3, humility. I did a podcast a while back. We'll put the link in the description below. With Brett Williams. Brett is the author of this book, You Can Be Right or You Can Be Married. I think that title sums up what we're talking about here, because when we get stuck in pride and we know that we're right, we start treating each other terribly. The principle that we're referring to here is humility, where we give up our need to be right and we can actually connect with people in a much more humble way. That also implies a willingness to change whatever it is that we're doing that's causing disruption. Principle number 4, forgiveness. You can see why this would be important. We'll do some other videos about forgiveness because that deserves some of its own time. To be willing to allow other people to change and giving up our demand for a better past. Forgiveness, crucial principle. Number 5, respect. This has a whole lot to do with how we treat each other and each other's ideas. Number 6, love. In other videos, I've referred to the love choice. You can get to this in the description below as well. Choosing love is crucial to a successful marriage and everything that that means. Number 7, compassion. Compassion has to do with being kind, and you always have a choice to be kind. Principle number 8, work. It's going to take some good old-fashioned hard work. Get used to that. No apologies. Marriage is work. Number 9, recreation and fun. Are you glad that I included that one? It's important to have fun. If we're not having fun, we're doing it wrong. So quick recap of those 9 principles. Positivity, focus on values, be humble and willing to change, be forgiving and allow others to change, respect, love, compassion, work, fun and recreation. Guaranteed. As you apply those 9 principles, I guarantee it's going to improve your marriage. So glad that you're on board with that. I'll see you tomorrow at Live on Purpose TV.